Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm excited to be here today with Beacon Driscoll. Beacon, welcome.
Hello.
We are going to talk about the topic of confidence and specifically the 6 hidden secrets of confidence.
Yeah.
And confidence is one of my favorite topics, I think, because there seems to be so much misconception about what confidence actually is. And it's something that as I work with men, a lot of men want that and feel like confidence is this gem or this, it's the thing I need to be attractive to other people, or it's the thing I need to be respected at work. It's like confidence it's big for men.
Yeah.
And what I also see is that the misconceptions lead men to think that confidence means, I know exactly what I'm doing at any time. I have to have it all together, right? All of these different ideas that to have confidence, you've got to be almost a perfect man.
Yeah.
And as you and I were talking about confidence and, your ideas about it, I thought this would be really, really useful for men. So
yeah, totally.
Why don't you start by talking about your idea of what confidence is versus what we tend to think it is?
Yeah, totally. So, confidence tends to be like pornography. We know it when we see it, but otherwise it's really hard to describe. And so since it's so hard to describe, it can get confused with a lot of things. So for example, it often gets confused for arrogance. Yeah. Or it, as you said, the confidence gets confused for having the right answer all the time. Or, even narcissism can be seen as confidence. And so then when guys want to be more confident, they want to feel more comfortable with themselves, they want to feel better about themselves, kind of their only models for confidence are the narcissists and the assholes and the arrogants. And but then there's also these people who just seem naturally confident, and you ask them, why is it that you're so confident? And they're like, I don't know. I just am.
I just have always been this way.
Yeah. So, kind of in my life, I've identified that there's, an entirely different way of thinking about confidence. And so we tend to think of confidence as a thing. We tend to think that if I just improve my confidence, that's what I need. Like I need to improve my confidence. Confidence is this thing that you work on.
Yes.
And, what I have found in my life is actually confidence is not a thing. It's a measurement of 6 other things. And so when these 6 other areas of your life are going well, then you feel confident.
Right. Right. You feel good about yourself. You feel, yes.
Yeah. You feel good about yourself. You feel confident. And, I don't know if your listeners, what metaphor is going to make the most sense to them. But if there's these 6 areas, then, it's kind of like a meter, like how confident are you feeling today is like all of these 6 things. So if so your life could be going pretty well in like 3 of the areas, really bad in 2 of the areas, and kind of average in 1. So then you'll feel like on average, fairly mediocre. But then if you identify the one that's the lowest and you boost that up, because boosting up one of the 6 areas is not that hard. Suddenly you're feeling like way more confident because your average, went up so much. So usually when I'm working with my clients, to improve their confidence, I'll take, there's a little test that I give on like, which of these areas is like the least confident for you.
Okay. What's making sense, I think, is either to go into those 6 things so we can talk about them, or I'm curious if you have a story of your own life that illustrates how you started to put these into action, whichever you want to go into first.
Yeah. So, okay. So like, for example, like one of the things, one of the 6 things is authenticity. Like, how much are you genuinely being yourself? Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of hard to see, in the photo, but you can kind of see that I have a mohawk. And,
in the audio, you can't see, but
the audio can't see the mohawk, but there should be a photo of me on the page. You can see that I have a mohawk. You might be able to see in that photo that I have tattoos. I'm wearing a funny shirt. Like, there's just ways that I have just given myself permission to be my full self. And that's kind of, and, it's funny because, that I mainly discovered that at Burning Man. And, because like Burning Man, you get permission to do all sorts of fun things.
It can be anything, anywhere, anyhow.
And, the thing that I always say about Burning Man is you can kind of just take on you could be any person, any gender, any sexual identity. Like, you want to go and be gay for a week, you can go be gay for a week and nobody will know back home. And
so how did you come to your specific and kind of unique and quirky mohawk and tattoos, and how did you find that?
It was kind of just like a process of elimination. So, like, for example, before I discovered the mohawk, I just had really boring hair my whole life. And like, it never looked good. I would like look at myself in the mirror and there's gotta be some better way of doing my hair that just doesn't look just like this. It was so not me.
Well, and it sounds like, right, you didn't feel like yourself, or you didn't feel good as you looked at yourself.
Yeah. Like, I just like my outward expression didn't match who I really saw myself. And so then one year I decided to get a mohawk for Burning Man. And the minute I got the mohawk, I was like, oh my God, this is the best haircut ever. And it felt so deeply resonant for me. And I've actually had this haircut now for 8 years.
Wow. And I imagine, speaking of confidence, it sounds like there was some way that you then started to feel more confident.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of like in the world of like pickup culture, and there's like this idea of like peacocking, like you should put on a show for people.
Yes.
And so this is not that.
Right.
This is, I actually use the peacocking metaphor with my clients a lot. Right. Like if you're a robin, bird, and you are like strutting your stuff, you've got your dance, you've got your feathers, and like, what are you going to do? You genuinely want to attract another robin. Like if a peacock shows up and is like doing his thing, you're like, yeah, that's not my jam. So it's not about showing off any feathers. It's about showing off your feathers.
Right. And not about putting on something that you think will make you more attractive to someone else, or make you more likable, or make you more wantable. Yeah. But something where you actually feel really good about yourself.
Yeah. So I've actually taken clients out for shopping, and aside from making sure that the shoulders and the waist fit, which are pretty much the only 2 things you have to pay attention to as a man, everything else is like, do I feel amazing in this piece of clothing? Yeah. If not, you don't buy it. Yeah. If so, you should. And it's within your budget and it's something that you need, you should buy it. So that, like, looking good and feeling good, like, in your stuff is like one of the ways of boosting your authentic expression. Yeah. And, there's lots to be said about authentic expression, being vulnerable, speaking what's on your mind and these sorts of things. But this is just like the tiniest example.
Just the surface example
of. Well, and, there's a lot of people who, there's a lot of people who express themselves outwardly in one of 2 ways. They either want to fit in, or they want to actively not fit in. And so both of those are actually will degrade your confidence.
if you're trying to fit in or you're trying not to fit in.
Yeah.
Versus you're actually paying attention to what feels good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What actually feels good for me is to have, like me personally, is to have tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not getting tattoos because they're going to piss off my parents. Like I'm not getting tattoos because it's like the cool hip thing to do. I'm getting tattoos because I genuinely like having great art on my body. And that's an important value of mine.
I want to get into the 6 hidden secrets, but I also have a question before we go there, which is, how do you know, like I've talked to some men who it's hard for them to know what they want. It's hard for them to know what they like. So how did you know that having tattoos, this might sound like a ridiculous question, but it's like, how did you know you actually wanted them or you actually liked them versus you were doing it for some other reason?
Yeah. So the tattoos are a more permanent example. You kind of have to just take a big bet on them because you're like, well, okay, here we go.
Here we go for the rest of my life.
But it's an experiment, right? Like it took me a while to figure out what kind of hair I like to have, what kind of clothes I like to have, what kind of art do I like to have on my walls. Like I thought I had great art on my walls at my house for a while, stuff that I really liked. And then my girlfriend came over and redecorated and was like, oh, this is so much better. So
did you actually like what she liked or did you?
Well, so the thing is that she picked stuff that she thought I would like better than what I currently did.
Okay.
And so it's not, and humans grow and change over time. Like this is why the tattoo example is a little bit rough because you're like, well, it's just part of me now. But everything else, like it's going to be a constantly ever evolving. Like what is the deepest expression of who I am today? Could be different than yesterday. Yes. Like you came up yesterday with something, it's great. And then today you're like, actually, I've changed my mind. Yeah. And you get to do that. And you get to do that. And this is, changing our mind is really hard for guys. We have this, one of the things that men are taught in our culture is that you have to be right. And so if you say like, oh, 2 + 2 is 5, and then somebody says, by the way, 2 + 2 is 4. You have to be like, nope, I'm right. I can't new information. That it doesn't matter. I have to stick with my original thing. Otherwise, it's going to look like that I didn't know the right answer, and I can't have that. I will go to my grave defending 2 + 2 = 5, rather than look like a fool.
Well, right, and talk about a kind of false confidence or it's arrogance in a way that comes from a sense of feeling deficient or feeling wrong or not right. I cannot show that I don't know this thing, which I think is often this traditional sense of confidence, right? I've got to look like I know what I'm doing versus someone who I believe, someone who's actually really genuinely confident. There's no need to prove that anymore. There's no need to prove I'm right. It's more of a, oh yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I don't have to take it as it's a personal, a personal lack or a personal failure.
Yeah. There's this quote that I like about confidence is that it's called the immune system of the soul. And the idea behind that is that, we talk a lot about like white male fragility, white fragility, male fragility. There's like lots of like fragility about there. And it's like, self-confidence is kind of like what your ability to weather the storm.
Yeah.
So like somebody like corrects you and you're like, great. I needed better information.
I needed to know that.
Yeah, I needed to know that. That's really useful. Whereas a non-confident person would take that as a ding to their
self-worth,
self-esteem, identity, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Let's go into the other. So we've got one so far of the, secrets, you could call them, or foundations of confidence that are this measurement versus a thing.
Totally. So basically in each of these 6 areas, there are things that there's like the things that will add to your confidence, and there are the things that will take away from your self-confidence. So I'm going to be talking about both.
Great.
So for example, the first one is self-acceptance. And so when you're like, hey, that's just how I am. right? So one of my favorite examples of this is that my memory doesn't work. Like, we'll get done with this talk, and unless I re-listen to what we just talked about, I'd be like, what did we even say anyways? Right? Like, it just, like, I feel like the guy from Memento all the time. I don't know if you've seen that show or seen that TV movie. But right, and I have two ways that I can approach that. I can be like, well, that's just how I is. That's okay. I guess I'll just deal with it. Versus like, I'm frustrated that I'm this way. I can't believe that I'm this way. What do I need to do to fix it?
Right. Or what's wrong with me? Somehow I'm stupid because of this, or any of those judgments you could have of yourself.
Yeah. So self-acceptance versus self-judgment is a big self-confidence thing. So the more you can accept how you are, that's going to lead to higher self-confidence, versus every time you reject how you are, that's going to remove self-confidence.
Well, right. And in our culture, not really being so aware. I mean, we're becoming more aware of these multiple intelligences, right? And, artistic intelligence and all of that, but emotional intelligence. But most of us who are living these days weren't raised with that recognition. And so it can be challenging, right?
Yeah, totally. So self-acceptance. And, and one of the things that's important with self-acceptance is that just because you're okay with how you are today doesn't mean that you don't also want to change it. You'd be like, okay, you know what, right now I'm going to just be in total acceptance of the fact that I'm 15 pounds overweight. Like, in this exact moment, there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
And tomorrow I would like it to be different. So I'm going to work towards it being different. Yeah. And wanting to improve yourself does not show a lack of self-acceptance. So let's talk about the next one real quick. So this is let's call it integrity. So let's say like most people in listening to this podcast will be one of two people. There are the types of people who are generally on time to things. And then there's the type of people who are generally late to things.
Wow, this is interesting. We're going to like block people into people who are on time and people who are late. Okay.
Well, so you could basically think of it as being like people who are on time versus people who are not on time.
Which one are you?
I'm an on-time person.
Yeah, me too.
And the reason why, so as an example of an integrity, the reason why being on time is such a self-confidence booster is because you said you were going to be there at 3 and you were there at 3. Like, you kept your word.
And and what makes that a self-confidence booster?
It means it's you can trust yourself. Like, I said that I was going to do this thing and I did this thing. So therefore I can trust myself.
Yeah.
And if you like, oh, I said I would do this thing, but I ended up not. And you might even have to make some excuses for not doing it. Maybe you have some shame for not doing it. Like showing up 30 minutes late to an hour-long dinner date. Like, there's all sorts of shame involved in that. And, beating yourself up. And, you don't trust yourself. Like, when if somebody asks me, like, hey, Beacon, can you get this thing done by Thursday? Like, I have so much history with doing things that I said I'm going to do.
That you trust yourself.
I trust myself to do this thing by Thursday, and I'm also seen as trustworthy. And so I trust myself, other people trust me, and that's an improvement to my self-confidence.
Yes. One of the interesting things I think about the fact that you went from the first one to the second one, right, is that if you do happen to be late, right, then comes the practice, perhaps, of choosing self-acceptance in that moment, right? Also, the integrity of, okay, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But it also flows into the one that you were talking about before of, okay, can I accept that I'm not very good at doing this right now? And I'm learning, or my intention is to, my goal is to actually be better at this.
Yeah. And, one of the things is that, stuff happens. And so integrity is not about adhering to some like rigid thing. Just because I said I was going to do it, I have to do it, right? Like I'm an introvert. I sign up for all sorts of fun social things that I later cancel on because I'm just not up for it.
Yeah.
And so this is not about always doing the things that you say you're going to do. But if you change your mind or something happens, like letting the other person know, like if I'm going to be 5 minutes late, I will text somebody to say that I'm going to be 5 minutes late so that they have different expectations about what's going on for me. And I feel more in integrity. Like I didn't just show up late.
Right. And would you ultimately say, that as you have more integrity, you actually get to know yourself more? Like maybe at some point, would you see yourself kind of knowing, oh, I don't like to do all these social activities that I think I'm going to do, so I would be less likely to sign up for that and cancel? Or is it more an ongoing process for you of, okay, I'm kind of learning as I go? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And I really appreciated that you said that, because it is and this actually leads into our next conversation. So Great. This is our third point. So by the way, we didn't plan this for you listeners. So the next one is all about making conscious choices. So as you get better at knowing what you like to do and what you don't like to do, you can consciously say like, hey, you know what? I am actually an introvert, and 4 events this weekend is not going to work for me. So I'm going to consciously choose to not do 2 of the 4 things. And as opposed to like the other option is to just go do all 4 things because I said I would, and then feeling bad about myself, being like, I don't feel like I'm in control here. Like I'm making choices that are not, in my best interest.
Right. They're not aligned with my truth right. And that doesn't give a sense of feeling confident.
Right. Yeah. So number 3 is making conscious choices. And so every time you say, okay, what do I really want to do here? And this is actually super important for women, because one of the things that women are taught to do in our culture is, say yes to everything.
Yeah.
And so the more you can say no to stuff, you're actually going to boost your confidence. I don't know how many women actually listen to this podcast, but for the women out there, practice saying no.
Yeah, there are some for sure. And practicing no is a good way to go. I know for me, practicing no, and I've worked with this with men too, there can be a sense of, oh shit, people are going to get mad at me. There can be some fallout, right? Especially if people don't expect you to say no. But I love what you're saying, which is that, you become more aligned with yourself, more self-knowing, such that then the people around you, you show them who you actually are instead of who you've been pretending to be.
Totally. And that goes back to kind of the first thing that we were talking about with authenticity. So the deeper cut on authenticity is, are you doing things so that other people like you? Or are you doing things because you genuinely want to do it?
Right.
And that for me is the key distinction for authenticity, which is like, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or am I doing this so that people like me, or that people dislike me, right? Like, am I doing this to get some reaction out of other people, or am I doing this for me?
Yeah.
Let's see. So let's move on to, so we just did, any other questions about making conscious choices before we move on to the next
not
one?
For now. I think that's great. So, and then authenticity you reviewed again. So authenticity versus doing things so others like you. So then number 5.
Number 5 is the experience of being a victim of circumstance, or versus like, I am actually responsible for everything that happens in my life. And so there, like this, barring acts of God, right? Like there's just some ways that you're not ultimately responsible for the exact circumstances of your life, but everything that is theoretically within your control, like, are you just like taking a hands-off approach, or are you saying, no, like, this is my job, like my life is my job, and I'm going to make it my job. Like, I have my hands.
This is how I'm going to get there. And
Like, are my hands on the steering wheel, or am I a backseat driver? Hoping to eventually get to where I want to go, but the person
Right.
for the person actually in charge doesn't seem to be doing any of the things that I would want to be doing. But hey, like, I'm not driving, so
it's not right. It's not. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. So the more the more you could be like, no, actually, this is my life is my responsibility. And so it actually kind of becomes a self-perpetuating system. So the more responsible you are for your life, the more conscious choices you'll make. And since you're making conscious choices, you'll actually be able to keep your word a lot better, because you're not signing up for things that you don't actually want to do.
Right.
And you'll feel better about your expression of authenticity, because you're like, hey, this thing on Saturday, I genuinely want to go.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a self-perpetuating upward.
This is great. It's an upward spiral.
Yeah, it's a virtuous circle instead of a vicious circle.
I was just thinking about a man I talked to yesterday who was saying something about, something that wasn't going well in something he wanted more of in his relationship with the woman in his life. And there was this interesting way I could hear, and I said this and he validated it, like that he felt hopeless about it. Right.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because he, in some ways, was asking me, like, can you tell me if this is possible?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, this completely seems possible to me. This seems very much in the realm of reality. And yet the energy I'm feeling from you is this kind of hopelessness, like it couldn't be possible.
Yeah.
And so then it's interesting to really look at something. I think maybe this is standing out to me because I often go into these holes every once in a while in my own life of feeling hopeless about something or feeling like something isn't possible. Yeah. And then I have to remind myself, right, that, that is the kind of victim mentality, for most things, they are actually possible.
Yeah. And like, it's the word hopeless is a great word for this. So like, because I go through bouts of hopelessness too, right? Like I have days where nothing is going the way that I want them to go, and the results in my life don't seem to be, correlated at all with the actions that I'm taking, and so it's the real victim experience. Like I can't do anything about this. Like this is happening to me. Yeah. And when you meet confident people, they generally feel like that they're in the driver's seat of their life. They generally feel like, you know what, I'm wanting, like, for me personally, like I'm wanting to improve my experience of my, emotions and my depth of vulnerability. And I am responsible for that, right? Like I've got things that I'm doing every week that, that are, forwarding that mission.
Nice.
And the same with my business, right? Like it's like solo entrepreneur is like the definition of this. Like I am the only one responsible for my business happening. And when I was working in corporate, there was actually a feeling of helplessness there, because I was part of a big team and I could totally kick ass and we could still lose the account because they're like, well, it didn't matter if we won awards and set records 3 years in a row. Like, still lost the account and I lost my job.
Yeah.
So, that was, it's very defeating to kind of like, there was, I was reminded of this post that I made on Facebook back from my corporate days. Was like, you can tell when you're in a meeting with a Fortune 500 company because everybody's laughing about how they can never get anything done. It's like the topic of conversation is about how meaningless all of their jobs are.
Wow.
And so it's kind of this in a nutshell.
Well, right. And interesting how, even within a situation like that, there is a way to start to take responsibility for your life instead of being a victim to that. And it sounds like, right, part of your journey has been to go from being in the corporate world to, all right, I'm going to have a business that's all on me and take full responsibility for this.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that actually leads into our next point.
Fantastic.
And yet again, we did not
plan
plan
that.
this. And so the last secret for confidence is to actually have meaning and purpose in your life.
Mm.
And so I got tired of selling crappy laptops to people who didn't know any better. Like that was my job.
Yep.
And I wanted to do something with more meaning in my life. And so that's why I wanted to work with men and to help them improve their confidence and improve their, ability to relate with themselves. And it's very meaningful for me.
And so do you actually, on a day-to-day basis, do you feel different doing this than what you're doing before?
Yeah, it's experience of like my life is headed in the direction that I find meaningful.
Yeah.
Right. Like I am, my mission is to create better men and, to help men become better versions of themselves, like lots of different variants on this. And, every time I walk away from a client session, I am on top of the world. And, how many times did I have that experience, when I was working for somebody else?
Right.
I had pretty good jobs. Like there was a couple of them where I felt like I was selling out my soul a little bit, but then there was some of them where I was actually really happy with the work that we were doing and very proud of the stuff that we were up to. And, but I never got that feeling like my day-to-day work is completely in alignment with my mission in this world.
Right. And I can just imagine how different that feels in your body even, right? In your physicality.
Yeah. My posture and like,
Yep.
And so that's why, confidence has become kind of this like mystery thing, because it actually affects so much. Like it affects how, like, the whole world of the pickup culture, like really like, cracks me up because they're trying to decode what works, right? They're trying to say, you stand this way, you talk this way, you act this way. Yes. And the part that they're missing is that those are actually symptoms of a deeper thing.
Totally.
They're trying to, are you familiar with the term cargo cult?
No.
Yeah. So there's this word that is my favorite. It's one of my favorite concepts. So the original concept got started because, back in like World War II, when, the US was being fairly awful to people, and, the US military Air Force set up a base on some island out in the Pacific, and we're just, using it as a stop off point. And so every day or so, like a plane would come and they would offload cargo and food and medicine and these sorts of things, and they would give it out to the local people because as a way of saying thank you for letting us use your island. And so then eventually the war ended and the military upped and left, and the people who were living on the island had no idea why it happened the way that it did. And so they wanted the food and the supplies to resume. So they built a mock airport out of like bamboo and wood. And they had, somebody standing on the top of the tower, like waving the flag. And they just like sat around hoping that the planes would resume because they had done all of the things that they thought caused the planes to arrive.
Yes.
And so this experience, the actual experience of this is that like they had no concept of the fact that there's like an entire country who's making all of these supplies, flying them over, dropping them off, and they were just doing the outward actions of what what
they had already been doing, right? Or what had been happening to make it happen yet, right? This whole idea that, if you stand a certain way and you wear a certain thing, then, it's going to somehow have you, and to some degree, this is true, right? There are power poses, and we've already talked about if you're wearing things that have you feel genuinely like you're going to feel better about yourself. And for the most part, you can't get through that deep sense of belief in yourself and self-acceptance and all of that just with some external behaviors.
Yeah, and so that's what the term cargo cult means. It's like it's doing the behaviors so that you get the result without actually understanding what the underlying reasons why that result actually occurs.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're, so that's, yeah.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. I really think that you are demystifying confidence. I think this is extremely powerful. I think many, many, many men are going to benefit from this.
Yay.
Yeah. And yeah, any last thing you want to leave men with for now?
So anytime somebody comes to work with me and they wanna improve their confidence, they're like, oh my God, there's 6 things and you got to do all of them. And I'm so far from where I want to be. And my recommendation is always like, of the 6, which one is the hardest? So you're like, oh man, like, meaning and purpose, like that's the one that I can tell is just the most lacking in my life.
And do you say actually go for that one first, or do you say?
Oh yeah. So that one is that, yes, go for that one first, because if you could, it's like, if your boat is sinking, you're not going to, take water out from the top. Like you're going to go down to the bottom and fix the hole. Right. So you want to start with the thing that's the lowest, and you want to say, okay, how can I do this better? How can I do one thing today that's better?
I love that. Right. Like what's the first step?
Yeah. It's like, okay, so if I was going to be, in more integrity today, like, okay, so like what's one time where I could actually be on time? Like if
one time I can actually say yes when I mean yes, or no when I mean no.
Yeah. And so get in the practice of doing at least one thing every day to work on the thing that's the hardest for you.
Great.
Like work on the thing that's the most efficient.
Yeah.
And then that might change over time, right? Like your lowest, the thing that's the below average, you get better at it, and suddenly there's something else that's below average, and so you work on that. You're going to get the most gains by working on the hardest thing. Yes.
Awesome. That's great. And where can men find you?
So you can find me at beacondriscollcoaching.com. And I'm Beacon at beacondriscoll.com. If you go to my Beacon Driscoll website, it's currently being rerouted to Beacon Driscoll Coaching. So, but you can email me. You can find me on Facebook, Beacon Driscoll. I'm really open to having conversations.
Great.
So Beacon at Beacon Driscoll is my best place to find me, and then awesome. Beacon Driscoll Coaching is my website.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's really great to see you, even though we only heard each other. We didn't actually see each other.
Well, we get to see each other, but everyone else will get to hear us.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.